Let's dive into the Eastern Conference matchup that finals matchup that just finished yesterday. So, Brian, what are your thoughts on the Miami Heat taking out the Boston Celtics in 7 games?
Let's start with the Heat. Let's start off with the winners first. So the Heat, the big adjustment that they made in Game 7 compared to all the other games is they just went purely small. Like other than Bam, like everyone else that they played was just small forwards and guards. I mean, I know Butler and Caleb Martin are 6'7", and they play the four, but to be honest, like everyone is a small forward or like a guard besides Bam. And they went just full on zone, right? According to ESPN, they played 39 possessions of just pure zone. And if you exclude like all the fast break opportunities that the Celtics have, then the Heat played over 60% of their defensive possessions as zone, and they went full in, right? They just went small. So, and to their credit, they really disrupted the Celtics, and they forced the Celtics to make a lot of like just really bad turnovers, right? And it wasn't like turnovers on like a pass or a lob, or it was just like disruptions on whether they were trapping or whether they were pressuring the ball during the zone. And that's basically what the Heat did. And then they just made shots, right? Whether it was Butler, whether it was Vincent, whether it was Lowry, and especially obviously Caleb Martin, like that's really all that he did. There was nothing in terms of their game plan offensively that they've changed for Game 7. The only thing that really changed for Game 7 and Game 6 from an offensive standpoint is that Butler played better, right? But then the Heat were just hitting their threes like they have been throughout most of the series, and Butler played better, and that's basically how the Heat won in very simplistic terms. In terms of the Celtics, I mean, I'll probably just go over a few things, and I'll let you chime in. Tatum getting hurt the very first play, that it patched the game. I don't know if it would have changed results that the Celtics would have won, but it definitely would have been more competitive. Jaylen Brown not being able to handle the ball. Like literally, if you watch the game, if he took more than 3 dribbles, he lost the ball. Not even exaggerating either. There was a good 4 or 5 turnovers that he had where he dribbled 3 or 4 times and he just lost it, or someone stripped him. There was one play where Brown was literally just dribbling, and Duncan Robinson on the weak side just dove and grabbed it, right? So I don't know how Brown hasn't like improved his not just his handle, but his decision making when he has the ball. That's concerning. I'm not going to talk about the 3-point shooting because it's pretty obvious. But another thing is the Celtics interior defense is still pretty supreme. Like throughout the entire series, especially the last 3.5, 4 games, Butler and Bam could not get anything going inside. Like Time Lord and Al Horford was really making their presence felt inside, but the Celtics perimeter defense is terrible compared to last year. And when I say it's terrible, I don't mean like man-to-man, one-on-one defense. I mean just off of switches, off of pick and rolls, on the fast break.
Non-ISO plays.
Exactly. It's terrible. There's so many miscommunications, right? If you watch a game, you literally see like Marcus Smart, Derek White, Jaylen Brown literally like pointing at each other whenever they miss an assignment and the Heat scored. You saw that at least a half a dozen times. It was crazy. And you know what? I think I will get into it because I feel like no one's talking about it. So people are talking about how poorly the Celtics are shooting in terms of the 3-point shot throughout this entire playoffs, not just this series. I don't understand why. I don't understand why they take so many 3-point shots for 2 reasons. One, they don't even they don't have a like legitimate high volume 3-point shooter on their team. The only one that they do have is injured on the bench in Gallo. And two, you've seen the Heat play zone throughout this entire 7-game series, throughout the entire playoffs, and you don't make adjustments offensively to attack the zone. The only time that they attacked the zone was when Derek White was taking the ball into the hoop in the third quarter for 4 straight possessions and scoring, or just handing it off to Robert Williams. That's the only time that they actually attacked the zone. Other than that, like, they did not attack the zone at all, right? So there's a lot more that I can get into, but I do want to hear your thoughts on the game as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was honestly, the game was up in the air, because I do understand that the Heat definitely just outplayed the Celtics in this game, and obviously, as you mentioned, I think Jayson Tatum getting hurt helped hurt the morale of the Boston Celtics. Like, to see their star player get hurt, he's obviously not 100%, and just to keep playing, I would imagine it hurt the morale of the team. But I do think that the Celtics were able to find success, obviously, in the three previous games, when they won 3 straight somehow, right? So after getting like practically blown out the first 3 games, they were able to make a comeback, especially in game 6. But for this game specifically, honestly, the Miami Heat actually ran more plays, and they were ultimately able to hit their 3-pointers, because this is like their greatest strength right now. A lot of plays for their shooters, such as Caleb Martin having a big game. Butler, as always, going to have a big game. Gabe Vincent was 2 for 3. Strus hit 2. Duncan Robinson getting minutes in general in this playoff, these playoffs. Even shoot 2 for 3. A lot of players just hitting their 3-point shots in this series. So it's all, in addition to that, just making that big adjustment by benching Kevin Love and starting, I believe, Caleb Martin in his place for this game made a tremendous difference as well. That I don't think people have talked too much about. Just that adjustment going smaller, and it obviously paid off in this particular matchup. So, I mean, at the end of the day, the Celtics, as you mentioned earlier, just did not play well against the Heat zone, despite seeing it every game. And it generated a ton of turnovers. A lot of people are talking about Jaylen Brown underperforming significantly, and that obviously is true. It's not just his inefficiency, but also just 8 turnovers. It's just a lot. But at the same time, what I would argue is that he was put in a position where he hasn't really been put in before, because at the end of the day, Jayson Tatum, at least in my opinion, and there's debates about this, but is the best player on the Celtics. And since he was not 100%, he had to take the reins and pretty much be the number 1 go-to guy for the team, and he just didn't play well.
So that's actually a good segue. So let me ask you this. So Brown was forced to take on more responsibility, right? And he said so after the game during his media coverage, right? Do you think that this series, and especially game 7, exposed Brown that he's unable to really forget being a max player, but just being a legit number 2 option, right? Because again, he literally had the entire game to kind of step up, because again, Tatum got hurt in the first possessions, and he really, really, not only did he play poorly, but you could tell that it was mentally impacting him. Like, he was taking quick threes, quick shots. He was scared. Yeah, and then he was getting stripped left and right, because those turnovers are not turnovers based off of passes. Most of them are just based off of him getting stripped or trapped.
Yeah. I think to be honest, I feel like this is a small sample size, so I don't think I can harp on him too much about having one bad game. I mean, obviously, pivotal game, it's a game 7, determines whether or not you're going back to the NBA Finals. But I think it's too small of a sample size to tell whether or not he is the big game performer or not, because it wasn't like Tatum was hurt prior to the game. And I think you got to also be mentally prepared to take on that responsibility prior to the game. Now, I understand, things happen and you should always be prepared. But when you're actually in that moment, you may have second guesses or other thoughts that might cloud your mind and may affect your play at the end of the day. Because I think for the most part, if you look at Jayson Tatum's stats, he only shot 13 shots, which is a lot lower than what he would typically shoot in a game.
Question for you.
Yeah.
On hand, do you know what percentage that Jaylen Brown shot this entire series from three?
From three, on the top of my head, I do not, but I know he did not have a good series, as neither did the entire Celtics team, to be fair. But I know he shot 1 for 9.
Do you want to take a guess?
Take a blind guess. Let's see.
Just guess a number.
I don't know, like 30%.
16%.
Oh,
16% for the entire series.
That's kind of crazy to think about.
Yeah. Yep. He took twice as many threes as free throws this entire series, which is kind of insane. And again, that's fine and good if you are like
if you're Steph or something.
if you're like a top 10, 15 shooter, then that's expected, right? Like especially when you're a high volume scorer, but like when your threes are not falling, you go to the hole. But to average 3 free throws per game and average over 6 threes per game, and you shot 16%. Yeah, it was because for me, like watching the VM series, like it was a lot of, when I say bad decision making, it's also just bad shot taking as well, right?
Yeah.
All right. Before we close this out, what are your thoughts about Butler winning the Eastern Conference MVP, aka the Larry Bird MVP?
I think it's fair. He is the guy that he sets the tone for the team. He's honestly practically everything for the team. He is the leader of the team. He's the one that sets the tone for the team. The Heat definitely would not be there without him. And I mean, obviously the other role players step up, but he's the most consistent guy in the series.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, and I was a little taken aback by how people was adamant that Caleb Martin should have been the MVP. He shot very well, and he defended very well as well, and he rebounded pretty well too. But he was never guarded by Marcus Smart, Brown, or other of the top defenders on the Celtics. He doesn't have the offensive responsibility that Jimmy has. He doesn't get double teamed as much as Jimmy has. He's not the number one player on the scouting
Jimmy's the
report.
reason why he's been able to be successful, because
exactly
the focus is on Jimmy and not Caleb.
100%.
If you think about his past, right, he's just some role player on the Hornets.
Yeah,
undrafted. Like no one knew about Caleb Martin prior to him joining to the Heat, and maybe people might not have known about him until the playoffs.
Like he was literally probably like 4th or 5th on the scouting report until game 4, maybe. Like you can argue that the top 3 players on the scouting report for the Heat on the Celtics board was Butler, Bam, and Gabe Vincent. And then Gabe Vincent got hurt. Martin started to improve. That he may have just eclipsed Vincent on the scouting report, but for half the series at least, like Caleb Martin was not a top priority from a scouting perspective for the Celtics. So, But yeah, I just wanted to like throw it out there because I was getting dumbfounded that like people were saying that Martin deserved the MVP over Butler, when Butler has such a much more tremendous workload and he has so much more attention on him compared to any other player.
Even if you look at from a pure statistical standpoint, like I think Butler is better than Martin in this series, or just in general as a player. But there's no shot to Martin. He obviously played out of his mind in this series, but they weren't. I think I mean, I'm not saying he's completely replaceable, but Butler is irreplaceable. Like
Yeah.
if Butler was not healthy, the Heat would not be here.
The
But
Heat
if
would
Martin,
get swept in
yeah,
the series.
yeah, exactly. But if you take out Martin, I still think the Heat have a chance, actually.
Yeah.
Because the other
Agreed.
players they have available. Like,
Yeah.
I think if not Martin, next man up. Maybe Strus takes up more minutes. Or someone Gabe Vincent. I mean, they both played a ton, but more minutes for Duncan. I don't know, depending on the situation, they both will figure out some sort of lineup that would utilize his teams. Which, yeah.
So, last question before we move on, and we don't have to spend a lot of time on this because we can spend more time on this during December. But if given the choice right now, would you try to extend Brown on a max? Would you try to trade, or would you just let it play out?
Honestly, I think it's tough because the new CBA is has very harsh penalties on going over cap. So that's a tough one. I think if you're the Celtics, I would see what you can get in the open market, and we can't find a solid offer. I honestly would kind of be forced to sign him at maybe not necessarily at the max, but like maybe like a near max if he's willing to take that. I think the only issue is he absolutely wants the max.
Yeah.
So assuming he does want that, if the Celtics don't pay him, maybe they can work out I mean, I guess it's part of the getting traded, but if assuming he doesn't get traded, I think the Celtics are kind of stuck and they have to sign him, because if they don't sign him, and we don't know if they're necessarily going to be able to land any other big free agents in this class, like what are they going to do to help like Tatum, right?
And they have no cap space.
And there's no cap space. That's an important thing too. They're kind of stuck. So at the end of the day, I would explore trade just to shake things up, because I don't know how much more, even though despite being a relatively young core, I think to some degree it might have been played out at this point, because it depends on the growth of Brown as well, right? I think he's kind of like an all-star level player, and he'll have moments of being a superstar, but he's not like consistently a superstar player.
Yeah. And he made all NBA by default because so many players were hurt.
That too. So at the end of the day, I think given the situation the Celtics are in, I think they should explore trades, but worst case scenario, I would sign him, because I think you can't lose a guy like that for nothing. It reminds me of a similar situation of where the Suns were last season, trying to re-sign Aiden. To some degree, obviously, the whole sign and trade thing with the Pacers, they kind of forced him to sign it, but even then, I don't think they were going to let him go for nothing. Like,
I agree with you.
I don't like if that trade, if the Pacers did not extend that offer to Ayton, I still think the Suns would have had to like make some sort of deal closer favoring Ayton, because if they don't have Ayton, then who else do they have? A similar situation with the Celtics, where it's like, well, okay, you miss out on Brown, but who is the alternative for Brown?
Yeah. I agree with all your points, and I do agree that the Celtics might be forced to sign him. Having said this, I preface my comments by saying we don't know what's going to happen during a draft or during free agency. So
exactly,
what's going to happen?
Explore trade, but if worst case, like you're going to have to sign him, because you can't lose him for nothing.
I will say that neither Tatum or Brown has reached a ceiling yet.
Yeah, so I mean, at the very least, they're very young players. So if things don't work out now, then there's still a chance that the Celtics can run with this group and be very successful in championships. I'm not saying that it's impossible, but considering they haven't won a championship yet, there's something for the team to think about. I mean, honestly, it wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing either if they were to re-sign Brown, because he is a younger star. It's not like the Suns trying to figure out whether or not they're going to re-sign CP3, right? It's very different situation.
Yeah, because assuming good health, you're basically guaranteeing yourself like a top 4 seed for the next 5 years, assuming good health, because there's no better duo in the Eastern Conference